Hey everybody, it's Brian Asbury, and I just wanted to welcome you to today's episode. If you could, like today's episode, hit that subscribe button, and let's continue to grow the developmentally speaking brand. Today, my guest is former WWE developmental talent. You may remember him as Axel Keegan or Mickey Keegan. Max, how are you, sir?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
Good, can't complain. The solar eclipse today, everybody, all my
Yeah.
neighbors are everywhere. I'm
Has it
just.
hit Indy yet?
Yep,
You in
it
India?
just hit. Yeah, just hit just now, right before we got on.
Chaos and apocalyptic foreboding for sure.
So I'm going to ask you a question you've probably been asked a million times. What made you want to get into professional wrestling?
It's cool as shit, man. I don't know. I mean, can I swear? Sorry, good
Yes,
grief.
you're fine.
Okay. I mean, I don't. Yeah, I think like anybody else, you kind of just get hooked into it at some point, and it really just connects in a way that you see this larger than life um, universe and these characters and these hopefully interesting storylines and obviously I think when you go live for the first time, that's usually the one that the show I think hooks you, but when you go to the live shows you really feel it. And when I think when you feel it, it's just there's nothing else you'd want to be near or a part of or talk about or watch. And that was true for me. Yeah.
At what age did you decide that this was something you were going to pursue?
um I think I really made the decision about 16 years old, 15 or 16, me and a buddy. And then at 17, we found a what do they call them? Like I think it was called like a fantasy camp or it's like a weekend where you get to kind of just meet everybody and kind of do some basics and get a feel for it. So
Hmm.
at 17 is when I actually started training.
Where did you start training at?
There's a company, there used to be no, there still is, I'm sorry. A company called Chaotic Wrestling up in Massachusetts. It was owned, or I'm sorry, the training facility was run by a guy named Mike Hollow, and he was a direct trainee of Killer Kowalski, who ended up kind of being our. Uh, he was a trainer at our school. I mean, he was in his 80s, so he wasn't really in the ring, but he was there and tell stories and kind of give feedback and pointers, and he was a cool guy.
So, how was your initial training? Was it everything you thought it would be?
I mean, in the age of the internet, you could always like read about and kind of learn more about what would happen behind the scenes, but it's never quite exactly what you think it's going to be. I think just the fact of how much of a sport it is tends to surprise people, especially people who are maybe a little bit more of a dreamer in wrestling.
Mhm.
Um, I was pretty realistic about that part of it, but yeah, I mean, it's so in depth and so there's so much information to really take in, even to just get you to be like passable at just doing moves or running through a drill or kind of doing basics. That once you kind of start to get good at that, 6, 12, 18 months, depending on how long it takes, there's such a broad world of knowledge and information beyond that, that it's kind of overwhelming. I think that's probably the piece that I just never expected. I mean, you kind of assume how big of a job it can be,
Mhm.
but when you actually get to doing it and you kind of see, this mountaintop of being good at fundamentals or basics as like, I got to get there. And then when you do, you realize that's really just the plateau that then opens up to this, vast range of other plateaus that you can get to. Um, it's just it's a truly expansive craft if you really dive into it.
Mhm. When you did your initial training and you started working, did you stay in that general area, or when did you start branching out?
Yeah, I mean, the first few years it was pretty much strictly New England, which for me at that time I was pretty lucky. There were a lot of opportunities, a lot of shows, a lot of good talent. So there was, a lot of opportunities for us to stay busy without traveling too far. I think after probably 3 or 4 years, I really tried to start getting out more down the East Coast and pretty much anywhere that would take me. It was mixed results, but got to a few different places.
At what point do you feel like you started to get your name out there?
Um, I think within the New England region, probably within the first 3 or 4 years, people started to kind of recognize who I was, and I started to get more consistent bookings and better bookings, and kind of treated more as a talent to be something to be crafted around. And then kind of as I got into like the 6 to 8 year range, I could be pretty decisive about which bookings I wanted to take and not take, to kind of better just hone my craft and have more opportunities with good talent.
Absolutely. When did the pursue to WWE begin, and how did that come about?
Where we started, we were always WWE focused. That
Hmm.
was, I mean, the indies were always present. It's part of kind of learning your craft. But we were all really kind of WWE or bust type guys. That's just kind of the way we looked at it, for better or worse. I'm not saying it's the right answer. It's just kind of how I came up. Um, so always kind of having Dr. Tom, or when Dreamer was the head of talent relations, or Simon Dean, Nova, um, whoever was kind of in that role would come by once or twice a year and do a camp with us. A lot of our guys were going to TV. A lot of our guys ended up getting signed. So it was kind of always the real focus for a lot of us was, how do we get there? That's the place to go in our mind, at least. Um, yeah, and I think I probably started going to TV semi regularly, probably 3 4 years in. At least once a year, maybe twice a year, depending on the year.
When your developmental deal came about, how did that all come together?
It was right when Regal took over. I don't know if he was officially talent relations, but he was kind of like a scout. And in his role initially, at least, I don't know what he does now. Um, was to be at TV and to, sorry, um, you can still hear me, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I can't hear you. That's the problem. Sorry. I'm good at computers. Um, so his role was to be at TV and to kind of receive the extra talents of all the indie guys. And he was really focused on getting us all workouts, getting us in the ring, taking a look, like really giving like an honest assessment, which there have been people kind of tasked with that job before, but they were always kind of like also an agent and a producer, and had other things that they had to do throughout the day. So it was not that they didn't care, but more like they just didn't really have time. So when Regal did that, the first time I went, I got to work out. I had a match, um, in the afternoon, not a dark match or anything. And then we did. He brought us to the back and we filmed promos, and so it was really just a matter of, okay, 2 minutes on this, 1 minute on that, 30 seconds on this. So, you know, I had been wrestling for, I don't know, 8 or 9 years at that point. And so these kind of, have a 5 minute match with somebody I knew. Um, and, he wanted you to pick who you wanted to work with. You could call it in the ring. You could, just, you could call stuff if you wanted to. But 5 minutes to me at that time, especially like a really basic style match, you wanted to see fundamentals as well as promos. That was easy. I mean, that, not to demean it. It's a really important skill. It takes time to get good at it. But that long in, I was really well suited for that. So that's kind of where the relationship started, and I kind of got some feedback and was told, look, come back in a couple months, we want to see you again. In that 3 months, I kind of applied the feedback and came back, and then they also ended up having a tryout, that I got called down to Tampa for FCW.
When you got signed, was it that transitional period between FCW and NXT?
Yeah, I got signed in 2012, and I reported in the last quarter of 2012. I don't remember exactly what month it was. And then I think we officially got word that we were moving to Orlando in, I think, December or January, and we moved by like May, I think, April or May, somewhere in that range, to Orlando.
What was your initial thoughts on Dale Mabry, FCW?
You know, it really always depended on who you asked, and I from a guy who came from the indies, Chaotic had a nice facility. We had two rings. There was a tape room. There was an office. It wasn't glorious, but it was well kept. But I also in my time I had gone to abandoned warehouses and trained, or places where people just set up a ring and sketchy area. So there was any number of kind of ups and downs on my way to that. So going to that facility, from my perspective, I was like, this is amazing. There's three rings. There's a full place to have a show with seating. There's cameras and all that other good stuff. There was a little training room. It wasn't big, but it existed. Which is not it's not the indie experience typically. If you asked some of the people from outside of wrestling, they tended to be a little more surprised with the modest accommodations.
Mhm.
But no, I thought it was great.
I feel like during that time period, they tried to sign a variety of people from wrestlers to models, football players, athletes. Just how was it mixing in with all those? Like that's a whole bunch of different worlds under one roof.
Yeah, I mean there was. I think there's definitely kind of personality clashes and style clashes and just regular human interactions, especially in a business that's so both athletically driven as well as like kind of just fucking made up.
Hmm.
It's we're we're asked to be top level athletes as well as performers, entertainers.
Hmm.
So you could always kind of tell why someone got signed when their specific area maybe kind of came up.
Hmm.
If they were an actor or a model or somebody with entertainment experience is more what I'm saying. They could kind of stand out in certain ways where if they came from the indies, they maybe had other experience so that would be highlighted. If they were just freak athletes or NFLers, you could always tell like, oh wow, they're just freaks. I mean, they're just in a good way. I'm not saying that pejoratively. Um, I think that there was definitely kind of groups of people who were tighter and less tight, but I mean, for the most part, other than like any locker room or wrestling show, people just like to talk shit because passes the time, I assume, and what else you have to do. But no, I found it pretty easy to get along.
How was working with those coaches in FCW before the transition to the PC?
Yeah, I mean, overall, great. I mean, I really liked quite a few of them. I mean, my tryout was the first week that Bill started, Demott. And he's got a reputation, and so I reached out to some people who had worked with him before, and they're like, honestly, just show up, be in shape, work hard, you'll be fine. And that's kind of how it worked out between us. I always, and I've said this to him. He's a football coach. He's an asshole from New Jersey. He likes to be in your face and push your buttons. That's kind of what his style is. I can see that being problematic in certain ways. And I think whether or not he would admit it, he's probably aware of that. But I started with a guy who was very football coach mentality as well. He wasn't the same way. He wouldn't, for lack of a better word, Bill could be a dick. Like that was kind of like his personality at times.
Hmm.
And he would admit that. I'm not, talking out of school about him. But that didn't really bother me. So he was fine. Norman, I think everyone you talk to will probably say Norman's fucking awesome. I always called him the mad scientist of wrestling. He just, the way his brain just works is, uh, you know, they should hold on to him for as long as he wants to do it. He's great. Who else? We had Joey was there. Joey was great to work with. Really, 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 really smart to the business. Really kind of understood the kind of like inner machinations of it all. He was just a cool guy to learn from. Um, Billy Gunn started at some point when I was there. Awesome, energetic, entertainer. Like that's just who he is. He understands the nuts and bolts, but he really gets the presence and the largeness of wrestling, and just he's just a really cool guy. Also an asshole in a likable way. He would say the same. Uh, who else was there? Oh, we had Steamboat towards the end of Steamboat's run as a coach. He was awesome, man. He was really just a guy who at I don't know what he was, late 50s or 60s probably at that time, who just loved wrestling more than anyone could ever love wrestling. It was just you could feel how like just just how intense it was to him and how important it was, and he just really cared about helping. He was just an awesome coach. I think anyone who got to work with him would say the same thing. He was just really just in tune with um, what makes this things what that feeling thing I was talking about earlier, like
Hmm.
where that comes from. He just had it, in spades. He was really cool. I think Terry was there as like kind of like a finishing coach is what they called him. Terry, I always got along with Terry too. He's really smart, lots of experience, kind of an old school mentality, but in a really cool way because he could parlay that into what wrestling is today from what it was, and so like bringing the important elements to today without, um, without just being that old guy who says, well, you need to sit and hold for 5 minutes. And it's like, yeah, you don't. And, that's a weird bastardization of what old school wrestling actually was because it wasn't that. I mean, way back when it was. But oh, and then Sarah. Yeah, Sarah started. She was at my tryout actually as a talent. And then they ended up hiring her to be the women's coach, which, I mean, holy shit. What a pickup that is. She's just, I had known her a bit from the indies, not super well, but a bit, and just she was just brilliant, just really
Hmm.
wonderful, great wrestler, really kind-hearted, good person. Um, yeah, she's great.
How was that transition from FCW to NXT? To Did it feel like there was more eyes on the product? They were more focused, investing into this performance center, and
Yeah, I mean, it would be hard to think that they weren't. I think that there was always a feeling that they were being watched and being paid attention to, and there's always rumors that the camera goes right to the office and insert Triple H or whoever's watching the camera sometime with the lights on it. And who the fuck knows? I mean, maybe they were. I doubt it, but there are cameras at the performance center that people could watch from their phone. So I think there was always that kind of background feeling of being watched, but definitely it's pretty hard to misunderstand when they drop $4 or $5 million into a facility like the performance center, especially when you have it to directly compare to what FCW was. I mean, it's literally the backside of a warehouse, which again for me is fine, but just comparing one to the other, it's not even close. The weight facility, the recovery facility, the green room or the green screen room, whatever it was. They had like they call it the confessional at the time. I don't even know if they what they call it now, but all the offices and then the upstairs with the locker rooms and showers, the whole thing was just it was clearly like a big investment. And then going from kind of the house shows that we were doing to starting to go to uh, what was the place called Full Sail for TV, and just seeing the level of production that they were really putting into it. And then you could definitely tell it was something that they wanted to be more than just a developmental program.
hmm. And as your time went on, did they have an idea for you, or was that on you to develop who you wanted to be, or was it a mixture?
It's both. Yeah, I mean, I think what I always tell guys that I work with, trainees like wrestling students, is you always want to have something for yourself figured out because especially on the independents, no one gives a shit. So either you figure it out or you don't. And it's not that literally no one cares about you. It's just that like you have to kind of create your own story. When it comes to WWE, they're certainly incentivized to do it, but with 60, 70 talent or however many they have down there, they're not going to come up with something for everybody. That's just not, the idea that you get a goofy name and then they just say, yeah, you're a welder and now you're the welding wrestler. It's like that's not how it works. A lot of the bad ideas sometimes come from the boys. Um, but I think if they have something or they think of something, or especially if you come from the indies and you have a little bit of a name for yourself, what you ultimately acquire is advocates. And that's most of what success in wrestling takes is people on your side. Because ultimately we're convincing somebody that what we do is entertaining. And the more advocates you have, the more people pulling for you have, the more people you have thinking about you, the more they're willing to kind of try and help you think of ideas. So you can pitch stuff. I pitch some stuff. I know a lot of guys do. And then you also like when you get onto the house shows as well as the promo day, you can just try stuff. And if they like it, they're like, that's interesting. Try that. Because
Hmm.
lot of it is no one knows what's going to work, but when they see it and they say, hey, that could work, and then someone else hears you say, oh, that could work, someone else might say, oh yeah, that might work. All you kind of get this like energy behind it, and that's how a lot of this stuff ends up panning
Did they have any initial plans for you during your time down there?
out. After a few months, I had tried a few things, a couple different pitches, um, with certain people or just on my own that kind of didn't really end up going anywhere. And then we were actually working on what ended up becoming. It was originally called the Lincoln Fight Club by Dusty, which was a interesting name. But it was kind of just like the vision that he had. It was me and Aiden English, which ended up becoming the Vaudevillains, um, with him and Gotch. Um, so we had started doing that, had the top hats and the dusters, and we're kind of just putting together. I think we probably had a half a dozen or a dozen tag matches on house shows, and then right around that time is when I got hurt, and that was it for me. And they kind of just figured out with Aiden, and then all of a sudden Gotch was there, and they just kind of put them together and had what ended up becoming that duo.
How did you get injured?
I took a bump from a pretty safe move. Um, didn't land what I thought was funny, and it definitely, like, I felt like a jolt when I landed, and you know, told the referee I needed half a second, gave me 5 6 seconds, and we finished the match. No big deal. Um, what had actually happened was I sprained my neck in the 4 5 6 region, so that whatever that entails. But basically, my neck locked up over the next 2 days and was really, really stiff. I ended up, doing like maybe a week of recovery, and then I wrestled for, I don't know, 4 5 6 more months, and I felt fine. I mean, it wasn't like I was, being tough. I felt fine. At some point, I started getting kind of numbness in my fingers on certain moves. So if I, like, drop down to my knee fast, someone would shoot up my spine and go to my fingers, or if I got tapped on the head in a certain way. And so I ended up talking to the doctors at the performance center, and we ended up getting X-rays and whatever, MRI. And what they found was in the 4 5 6 region, I had spinal stenosis, which is like a thinning of the spinal column. So basically, your column sits your spinal cord, I'm sorry, sits in the column. The column has, supposedly 11 millimeters of room. Your cord is 5. I had 6 millimeters of room, so there just wasn't any give there. So when I was, having certain impacts, it was basically concussing my spinal cord.
That's terrifying.
It's not great. Yeah, it's not great.
So you knew right away that your career was over, or did they try to see what was going to happen?
No, I mean, with that type of injury, basically, I had two bulging discs as well. And with that type of injury, there was like one of three maybe options. So there's one of you're done, two of you get, double spinal fusion, which for an athlete means you're done, um, or three, you just like hope it goes away, which is not a great choice necessarily.
Hmm.
Um, but basically, their thing was, we don't know how. There was nothing, at least at the time, to do about something like that would be satisfactory. And as long as I was symptomatic, meaning having the numbness, they pretty much, said, like, this really, you're 26 years old, you don't need to get a double spinal fusion if you're not in pain every day, which I'm not, luckily. um, so it was kind of just, this isn't worth the risk, with something that we just know we can't control.
What was the next move?
Depression. It was awful. Yeah, I mean, it's you're training for your dream job, and you're completely enthralled in this world and trying to figure your shit out, and you know getting some positives and getting some negatives, and probably overthinking everything, and really trying to figure out, like, okay, I'm 26, like, how do I get myself onto NXT in a regular role? How do I get myself to the road? That's all you think about. And it's like, this is going to be the next 20 years of my life, hopefully, even if realistically, that WWE careers are not that long. you hope for it. You know, of course, you're not working towards mediocrity. You're working to figure out how to make something. And then all of a sudden one day they say, "Hey, you're 26, and other than your neck being a little wonky, you're fine. Also, you can't do this anymore." It was really really hard to readjust. And luckily, I had a good enough relationship that I got a uh, whatever you want to call it, creative role for a few months to try that out. I mean, I basically, when I was talking in the office with Bill and the fuck that guy name, Canyon, um, I basically, through crying, but still just saying, okay, what's next? What can I do? I want a job. Give me something. And we went back and forth a little bit, and then this role kind of came up, and I took that.
Now, how was that transition? Is it something that you wanted to do? Is it something you grew to love?
The transition was the shit. It,
Hmm.
it sucked. I was not in a good headspace. I was really young. I was just not prepared for that level of loss. And, switching to that role, you really change your relationship with talent, which those were my friends. So you don't have quite the same relationship that you once had. And, it's a really competitive environment. Just like you got to prove that you're worth a shit as a wrestler to a company like that, you have to prove even harder that you're creative or intelligent or have anything to offer, because there's a shit ton of people who want on that job.
Hmm.
Um, and it was really just kind of ill defined. They didn't really know exactly what they needed. So for me, I would say I really wanted to do good. And I think nowadays I could be a real benefit. I'm not looking for a job, by the way, at all. But I'm just saying, like, where my headspace is at. That's all. That's all I'm really talking about. I think I have a lot to help now, which is why I really enjoy helping to train people now. But where I was at then, that shift from one to the other, I couldn't just shut off
Hmm.
how heartbroken I was, and how kind of you know um, devastating that loss was. I was really really not you know right, and I plodded along and helped as much as I could, and ultimately they went a different direction, which was the right choice for both of us. Um, but I think for the right person in the right mindset, it's a really cool opportunity for sure.
Hmm. Was it a mutual decision or was it something you walked away from?
No, they let me go. They ultimately, I think they brought somebody who was on the road and had something to do with developmental off the road to NXT. Um, and then they also just hired like a basically an administrative assistant,
Hmm.
and those were kind of the two fields that I were in, and I kind of became redundant, and it was just. And again, I wasn't crushing it. I was doing the job and I could be helpful, but I just, like I said, I really wasn't right.
Is there any particular moments that stand out more than others during your time in NXT, whether it was in the ring or being a part of the creative team?
Um, Particular moments. Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of fun memories. I really liked, going to the shows with the boys, and we had a kind of crew of people who would ride together, and that was fun. And you know, I was really fortunate that they really took to my in-ring ability pretty quick, so I got to work pretty much every house show that we did. Which that doesn't mean you're on TV. That doesn't mean that you're going to make $1 million. But for me, as a worker, as a wrestler, as somebody who loves this stuff, to go to the shows and just sit there and watch matches is the shits. And there were a lot of people who did that and fucking hated it. A lot of really talented guys too, who just had to sit around and wait. So I really enjoyed being able to perform, for that company, even at a limited role. That was really just a blast. Getting to meet some people who were heroes to me, and to work with and for those people, and to have the approval of a handful of guys who verbalizing, you're good at what you do. You're a good worker. You're a good wrestler. That was just really validating, for the time that I did put in, to get that out of it for sure.
Now, how long after you released did you dip your toe back into wrestling?
I mean, I stopped by the school in New England a couple times to say hi and hang out, but I didn't really get involved again until 2021 when we moved my wife and I to Arizona. I kind of was just like, fuck it, I want to do this again. I
Hmm.
really miss it. It's one of those things where you get busy with life and all these other things, and you don't. In my mind, it's like I kind of didn't know. Sorry, I didn't know if I really wanted to get back involved. I mean, there's a lot of unpleasant things in wrestling too. Um, and when I moved here, I just said, why wouldn't I just try it again? So I reached out to a school that was down in Phoenix and said I was in the area and wanted to talk. And myself and the owners did talk, and we had a really nice conversation. And it ended up being that they were willing to let me come in once a week and hang out and help with their shows and kind of train their talent. And it's been fucking awesome. I really love it. It's been great.
So you have a new passion for this side of things now.
Yeah, yeah. I think that I have given myself enough time and space to kind of get through the other shit and just really go back to it's a beautiful entertainment uh, medium when it's done well, and I really still love um, the craft of it. I really do. I think it's just fun and cool, and it's an entertainment style that kind of gets a bad rap for any number of sensationalistic reasons, but when it comes to the core of it, it's just really good athletes telling a really interesting story in the moment, reacting to the feedback they're getting in real time, and hopefully, when done well, harnessing that energy and creating those moments that we all get addicted to.
If you had any advice to give to anybody getting into professional wrestling, what would it be?
Um, what would it be to someone new? A few things. One, set goals, and there's like a way to do that about like God, it's like measurable, blah 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 blah, time tied, etc. It's like really set goals. Don't just say I want to make $1 million or I want to work for WWE. There's like 1,000 goals that go into working for WWE. So I would say set realistic goals that you can measure over a certain period of time to see growth because this business is so expansive. Like I were talking about earlier, you you can almost kind of lose sight of the shoreline sometimes. And I found that in my career, and I've seen it in other people's career, and I see it in some of the guys I work with. It's really important to stay tethered to what's important to you because you can get lost in trying to figure out a headlock takeover for 12 weeks, and all of a sudden 12 weeks pass, and maybe you got it, but you haven't really paid attention to your fitness, or haven't really worked on your promos, or haven't really watched any good wrestling to really kind of hone your craft. So having realistic goals is one. Two, uh, work out, get in shape. I mean, I was never a gym guy. I worked out. I had luckily a lot of friends who were in better shape than I was, and they would give me pointers, and I could figure some stuff out. But it is a athletic, and it's athletic uh, style of entertainment. So, and it's a marathon, not a race. So you got to be able to fortify your body for the long term. Um, Watch tape. I mean, guys who are good at this, who are on TV now, still watch tape
Hmm.
because there is. It's not about repeating everything you see, word for word or spot for spot. It's about taking ideas and concepts and kind of using those to help influence you. You don't know what you don't know. So having a lot more inputs is better than having like a handful of inputs that are just the ones you like. And then I think the biggest one, and this is the one I tell the guys I work with all the time, is don't get so narrowly focused on what you're doing right now to realize there's such a big world out there. And I think what's true, especially in a lot of wrestling schools that I found, is guys can get stuck in this the day-to-day drama of the school or the students or whoever, or focusing on being the best student at the school, or focusing on achieving the goal of getting onto XYZ show, as opposed to realizing there's 50 states, they all have wrestling, or most of them probably do. There's hundreds of countries that wrestling exists in. There's millions of matches you can go find. There's such a broad world. Don't just get stuck in this is the way to do it. So, I'll speak from personal experience. When I was saying earlier about like, well, we're WWE or bust, there's a broad world of indie wrestling that we didn't, not that we didn't pay attention to, but we didn't really work towards as much
Hmm.
as we probably could have and should have, in a way to kind of be more prepared for bigger and better opportunities. There's a lot you can get out of wrestling on the indies, both good and bad, um, to get your name out there, to learn more, to try different styles, to work in front of different crowds. And what I always tell people, just get out there and do it. If you're wrestling the same 5 shows every month or every other month, you're going to have a limited amount of growth you can get from that. If you're not wrestling with people better than you, or people different, or different crowds or different areas, you're doing yourself a disservice if that's your goal. If you want to work the local shows and that's all you care about, that's great. There's no problem with that. But I think to really grow in this business, you need to do a little bit of immersion therapy.
I couldn't agree more. Where can people come train with you at?
I do Mondays down at the Arizona Pro Wrestling Training Center in Mesa. God, I should really know that. That's pathetic. It's in Mesa. Yeah, it's a really good school. The guys who own it are you know big time veterans in this business. They've done a lot. They have a lot of experience. They're really good. The facility is professional. The talent that trains there is really high quality. There's a good environment. It's positive. It's safe. We really care about kind of technique and learning the craft of wrestling. And there's a focus on getting people in shape so they understand like what they're agreeing to do. As well as they have a promotion that runs bi-monthly, um, for their main show, and then they have like a student show that also runs kind of the alternate months. So there's just a lot of opportunity in a state that is really big and doesn't actually have a ton of wrestling in it right now. But yeah, it's a great spot.
Absolutely. I just want to say thank you for coming on today. Thank you for what you've done for professional wrestling and what you continue to do, sir. It's been an honor and a privilege to speak with you a little bit today.
Thanks, man. You can call me Max. But pretty appreciate you having me on your podcast, Brian. It's pretty cool.
Absolutely. And if there's ever anything I can ever do, please feel free to reach out.
Just send me $1,000. We're good.
Well,